Hi, Ruth. Welcome to our interview, and thank you so much for agreeing to share your journey as a coaching supervisor.
Hi, Andrea. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Mm. Ruth, would be great if we could learn a little bit about your background as a coach and a little bit about what brought you to coaching in the first place.
Yeah, I trained as a coach at the University of East London on their Masters in Applied Positive Psychology and Coaching Psychology. And my coaching tutor was Yannick, uh,
Mm.
who is one of the tutors on the ICCS course. And I think I came into coaching for lots of reasons. I'd come out of a background in education and educational leadership over a period of 25 years, both in the UK and overseas in Zambia, where I lived and worked for 11 years. And I'd moved from teaching into leadership. I'd ended up in a marketing and admissions role and felt that I'd moved away from connecting with people. And I didn't want to go back into teaching. And I came across actually positive psychology first. So, this idea that we can build on people's strengths rather than focusing on deficits. And I think coaching was interesting to me, but not the main reason that I chose the course, but actually I became passionate about coaching, shifting of perspectives. And during that course, I set up my coaching business and started small. And then when I graduated, I ended up teaching on the program. I'd done some university teaching work in boarding management. I taught on a postgraduate certificate in boarding management for a few years. So I stepped into a role initially temporarily at the University of East London and then ended up staying there for a number of years and then got a position at the University of Cambridge as a tutor on the coaching certificate program. And then I ended up taking over as director of academic director of that coaching certificate program at University of Cambridge. Actually, with perhaps less experience as a coach than I would have liked, but I think working with so many students and really understanding the bones of coaching at the same time as building my own practice um, helped me understand a lot of the coaching psychology models and developed a real interest in that, as well as working with my clients.
Thank you for sharing. This is so beautiful to see the journey in you becoming and being more and more involved in coaching, and how what triggered the transition into coaching supervision, not transition, but this desire to train as a coach supervisor.
I think I was really interested in developing my coaching further, and I had a number of different potential routes to doing that. But I think I wanted to explore practical development. Um, I think I was an academic supervisor of students in the two universities that I was working with. Um, and I read up around coaching supervision. I was intrigued by, I think, the differences. I'd done some coaching supervision of student coaches. So I
Mhm.
wanted to develop those skills and make sure that I was properly qualified to be doing that in that role. Um, and to be honest, I was partly influenced by the fact that Yannick was teaching on the course, and I knew him and I trusted him. So that influenced me as well.
So, was there a defining moment in your journey that solidified this decision to train as a supervisor? Or was that a combination of the things that you just shared?
I think it was a combination, but I also think that speaking to people who had trained as coaching supervisors, who had told me how transformational it was, not only as the career development of supervision, but actually how much it influenced their coaching too. I don't know if you there's been a recent paper published by Ursula Clideret and Martine George about the developmental journey of a coaching practitioner training as a coach supervisor. That's just been published in Coaching, International Journal of Theory, Research and Practice. And that talks about the developmental learning journey of training as a supervisor. It goes into adult learning, that idea that it isn't just more information that you're acquiring, but it's learning how to process, restructure, reshape yourself and your understanding of the world and your experience. And I think, for me, I've always been intensely curious as a human being. And I was really interested in that self-development element of coaching supervision. And coaching is all about helping perspective changes and shifts in the way that our understanding of the world might block or limit us. And I was curious as to how coaching supervision might shift blocks I might not even know I had as a coach.
Yes, I love the way you put it. There is not coaching supervision is not just more information.
Yeah.
But it really is a journey of transformation, of shifts, and this is something that we hear. I've experienced personally as a coaching supervisor, but also a thing that it comes up in every interview that we have, in all of the other interviews and conversations we have with coaching supervisors who trained, is this deep impact personally, professionally, as a coach, as a supervisor, as a mentor, as a trainer. It reaches so far, the impact, and I'd love to hear more about that in our conversation in terms of how you've experienced this journey. In terms of how would you say that you training as a supervisor impacted your approach in coaching and you personally?
I think that the cohort I was with was fascinating to interact with, because there were coaches who came from different parts of the world who had very different coaching training. And I don't know about other coaches, but I believe that the methodology of your own coaching training profoundly, you know, like culture influences how we see the world. Our coaching training creates a coaching culture from the organization with which we train. So I trained at the University of East London, which was very sort of holistic, well-being focused, humanistic approach on the whole to coaching training. University of Cambridge was much more focused on challenging coaching, executive coaching, more, I felt, goal orientated, very thorough training, but a different flavor. And actually the shift between those organizations challenged me, because there was a lot of, okay, if you look at Heron's model, that sort of facilitative, cathartic, a supportive, catalytic approach as opposed to sort of challenging, informative. And so I think, number one, being exposed to different perspectives on what coaching is was really interesting and useful, and caused me, and as part of that hugely reflective process all the way through. So, okay, why do I think that is, you know reading widely, thinking about ways of looking at coaching differently, um, and what it is for. And I think I also found some elements of engaging with supervision quite challenging in itself. So in the sense that, maybe I had a bit of a misconception that supervision was coaching for coaches, which it isn't. And there's I looked back before this interview at the paper that I wrote at the end of the course, and mine was why supervision. And I also looked at my personal statement, and I'd referred to actually a quote that I think it was Jonathan Passmore had given about coaching, that he referred to a coach as a benevolent torturer, somebody prepared to hold their coachee's feet to the fire. And I think he was talking particularly about executive coaching. And that felt like anathema to me, because I'm very much a believer in being supportive, helping people feel safe, allowing them to step into, in a relationship, a genuine, curious exploration where they can share things that there is no fear about being judged. And I think at that time, I'd interpreted that quote uh, as being counter to that support. And I had a conversation where I was challenged actually about that understanding of challenge within coaching supervision. And I think, having practiced now for a few years as a coaching supervisor, that understanding has changed. So I'm much more confident in challenging my supervisees and seeing that challenge as supportive, because we're on a shared journey to be the best coach. The other thing I think I hadn't understood was, I thought that coaching supervision, when it's done with one coach, not in a group, it was very much a dyadic relationship, that you are supporting, as a supervisor, you're supporting that coach. But my awareness kind of expanded over the course, and has continued to expand since, in that there's a much more systemic sense of the coach's coachee always being present in the room. So you're not, you're kind of working with and through the coach, and you're working for the coachee, but also for the coaching. So that there's a relationship, and at times also with the organization, or that sense that it isn't just about helping this person with issues, but it's about working with this person for the benefit of the profession of coaching, as well as their specific coachees, and kind of all coachees. So there's a sense of mission, I guess. I don't know if that sounds too idealistic. I feel it's really important work, and I didn't have that more complex understanding of what coaching supervision was when I started, for sure.
There's a few things that come to mind as you share all of this is the responsibility that comes with coaching supervision, because it's so far-reaching, right? You're impacting your clients, their clients, and the system that all these clients are part of.
Right.
And as you said, I also personally feel a sense of responsibility towards the industry because it's not regulated. I almost feel like it's down to me and to supervision in general to keep a standard, raise the standard of coaching and making sure that coaching is delivered in at a certain standard, but also it's understood. We
Right.
call coaching something that it's not, or it's really far-reaching. And also from what you shared, the word courage comes to me.
Right.
It's almost being braver or more, I don't know, bravery or courage in terms of you stepping out into areas like challenging the coaches that you work with, your supervisees, in a way that maybe you wouldn't have done it
Yeah.
before.
Yeah. And understanding that that doesn't mean that there isn't that care and safety within the relationship.
The support that you mentioned.
Yeah. One of my
Mhm.
clients recently shared a LinkedIn post talking about their experience of working with me, which was so moving for me to read because it summed up what I tried to do and be as a supervisor. My client talked about a blend of expertise and genuine care and being held to account in a way that's compassionate and challenging, encouraging growth and not straying from kindness. And that was just like, wow. And I think there was a line in it that was something like Ruth holds the ethical and moral line of our profession with care and courage. So you just saying courage now, um, talking about what's best in service of the clients and encouraging not just reflection on coaching, but the connection to coaching. And I was thinking it felt like I'd moved so far in my journey towards being the kind of supervisor that I wanted to be, if that was the experience reported
Mm.
by my client, then and recognizing as well that it's a journey, that all clients are different, and that there is always more to do and more to learn. So I think the supervisor has to be the subject of their own consistent reflection and supervision. I think that's one of the things I really like about ICCS is there's that ongoing support for supervisors, that feeling of being part of a community, that you've got forever supervision for supervisors. You can bring things that come up, and I was a regular attendee as a new supervisor, and I think I'm slightly less regular attending at the moment, but I do go, at least quarterly, and still find that reminder of what we need to be working on as supervisors. I have my own supervisor in terms of what I need to be working on as a coach, because that's an ongoing process too. But that evolving responsibility to the supervision profession as well as to the coaching profession is something that I think I really bought into in my training and since.
Mm. It's if you don't mind, I'll bring you a little bit back to the days
Okay.
when you were still training.
Okay.
Um, were there any moments where you found particularly challenging while you were training as a supervisor, or maybe surprising, something you didn't expect to learn, discover about yourself, or in this journey of training?
I think the challenge that I had was similar to what I was talking about before, in terms of understanding the line between being person-centered and listening as a coach. So moving between these different hats. Where Proctor talks about normative, formative, restorative aspects. I was very comfortable with the restorative and helping people explore the normative. What are the ethical boundaries? And that's something I was quite clear about. And I think I didn't find that so difficult because I'd had my previous teaching hat. So if somebody's going, this client really, it's a bit close to the boundary with therapy, but I really think I can help them. I didn't have a problem in challenging in that area. Going back to, well, what is coaching? What is therapy? What are you doing here? What are your qualifications? And what could the potential for harm be if you step into a zone that's out of your comfort? And again, that same thing with new coaches who struggle with wanting to offer solutions, and talking about that sort of impact of giving somebody a solution, making somebody dependent, not allowing the thinking take place. That Nancy Klein quote, how far can this mind go before it is in need of mine?
Yes.
And really stepping into that. But I think the formative part of sharing tools and strategies to help with the development of coaching, I found it really difficult to know when it was okay to help extend the range and strategies of the coach without imposing my work, to be supportive and informative without being overly influential. That boundary of supervision took me a while to be comfortable with. And in the end, like so much in coaching and supervision, I think it comes down to really clear contracting.
Is that what helped you to overcome this challenge, to understand, to clarity on the contracting?
I think so, but I think also modeling from the tutors. So that and not just from the tutors, there are some very experienced coaches and coach supervisors in the group. So I think, like anything, reading, there's extensive reading around the subject. There's investigative, theoretical understanding of supervision. There's practical understanding in doing practices, doing goldfish bowls, doing all of the different exercises that we did together, but also watching other people and how they engaged. Sometimes you learn from thinking, well, that's not a way that I would ever approach it. You can learn from things that you don't agree with or feel would be right for you, but also seeing the range of expertise demonstrated by the tutors and other members of my cohort was really instrumental in helping me feel brave and try things out. Just like with coaching, I think when you learn to coach initially, it can feel very alien. If you're using techniques like clean language for the first time, it can feel super uncomfortable. And if you practice and if you trust the process, go with it, until, I think I wrote in that assignment, Why Coaching, those stages of learning from unconscious incompetence, when you come into finding out about supervision, there are so many aspects of it that you don't know that you don't know. And then that conscious incompetence where you're thinking, wow, I'm not sure I can do this. There's a pull, isn't there, between authenticity, who I am as a coach, who I am as a human being, and efficacy. I can see that this will work and be effective, but I don't know if I can do it. You're in that deeply uncomfortable zone. And then you learn how to do it so you're consciously competent, but it doesn't feel like you yet. And then
Yes.
practice and support, you become unconsciously competent and you're able
Yeah.
to move into using those skills and ideas and being more familiar with them, but always being at the edge of reading more. And that, as you say, this is a new profession. Many coaches don't use supervisors, but it's so hugely beneficial to those who do. And it's such a privilege to be a part of a profession and a mission that makes such a difference.
Mm. And it is a process, isn't it, to learn this profession because and I think a lot of very experienced coaches have been in this position long time ago when they learned coaching, right? So to come back to this place after so many years, it's not always easy, but you beautifully described those stages, that very normal stages to go through in order to learn this new extremely rewarding profession.
Yeah, it's interesting what you say, because I know a number of supervisors who have not had supervision training. And, it's, I suppose that it's like coaching, isn't it? There are some coaches who did a weekend course or something on Udemy, or, that, and then they've been coaching for a long time. And I suppose one question might be is, would there be benefit to doing this kind of coaching supervision training if you've already been supervising? Well, as I said, I had been doing some supervising as part of coach training, and I found it incredibly useful to come back to the theory. But actually, with teaching, I'd had a similar experience. So I began my teaching career in Zambia, and I didn't have the UK PGCE qualification. And then after I'd been teaching, I think 17 or 18 years, I took the PGCE, got my UK credentials. And I think I was really worried about, I'm already a teacher. I already know what I'm doing here. I can manage classrooms. It was so interesting to engage with the theory, to have those discussions, to come back as an experienced practitioner. And it absolutely added to my understanding, my practice. And I would say that the coaching supervision training is the same, in the sense that, of course, you're going to be coming across reading theories that you haven't come across before, but that privilege of being able to engage with other people who are immensely experienced and perhaps very different coaches to you was invaluable.
I always say that I feel like I learned as much from the course as I learned from my group,
Yes,
the cohort that I trained with.
right.
Because the training is so experiential and conversational and interactive, you have those opportunities to learn from others and to share. And definitely, and you reminded me of sometimes just going back to the basics, even if you know things, but if you've been doing them for a number of years, going back to the basics can be very useful. Like, for example, a lot of our conversations were around contracting,
Right.
things that we've learned right at the beginning. And from the people who had 5 years, 10 years, to those who had 20 years, 25 years of experience in coaching, we all found it extremely useful to go back and talk about contracting and recontracting in coaching and in supervision. It was.
And I completely agree. And I also think that there's something to do with the why,
Mm,
that, when you're new to a subject such as coaching, and you're being taught by people that you hugely admire, and you know there perhaps is a tendency to think, yes, because I've been taught this way, this is the way it is. And
mm,
then to say, okay, maybe there are other ways of doing it. Why do I do it that way? And to re-engage and explore for yourself. So not because my coaching teaching experience told me that, but what is the impact for me in doing it that way? Again, that exploration of Heron with those challenging words, manipulative or degenerate, in terms of why you do something. Am I approaching coaching in a catalytic, supportive manner because I'm more comfortable doing that, or because it's the right thing for my client at this time in this way? Is there the potential accidentally to do harm through sticking to my comfort thing? What tools am I using? Why am I using them? Is that because I've done it so much that it's easy for me? And is easy for me the right rationale for making a choice? So all of those kinds of questions that help you really think about choices for yourself. So I found that I had expected to learn how to be a good supervisor. I'd had a lot of positive feedback of other people who'd been through the course. I think what I hadn't expected was how impressive the impact on my coaching was. I'd thought I came in as a pretty good coach. I felt quite confident about my coaching, but I think doing the supervision course made me a far more impactful, dynamic, engaging
mm,
coach, as well as giving me those skills of supervision.
mm. Ruth, this beautifully leads me into asking about what kind of challenges do you support your clients with? And I guess some of the questions that you've been putting on the table will be relevant for the sessions that you had. Would be great to get a flavor of the challenges that your supervisees bring.
Okay. I've got two. I have lots of different supervisees, and they all have different challenges. But I think the kinds of supervisees that find me are coaches who are setting up new coaching businesses, and so they're early career coaches, and they are exploring what kind of coach they want to be, what kind of clients they want to work with, how they can best support those clients, and the kinds of issues that commonly come up. Contracting and boundaries, I guess, would be the most usual too. But also that pull between efficacy and authenticity that I described for my experience of coaching supervision, I think is very common with new coaches. How much me can I bring
Right.
into the coaching space? How much do I hold back? How much do I stand forward? What is the work that we're doing together? And the question, how do I, especially coaches who are working with coachees in an area where they know a great deal about the environment,
Mm.
that urge to advise and how to manage that. I think that comes up a lot with those clients. And then I have fewer but amazing clients. And I remember when I started, there were a few clients who were super experienced coaches. And I remember being quite taken aback that they wanted to work with me. I mean, really having that sense of, oh my goodness, this is somebody who's been coaching. I'd only been coaching since 2018 professionally. Some of these amazing coaches have been coaching for 20 years, and especially in executive settings. But really wanting to explore the nature of their coaching, the nature of um, what my client was talking about, reflecting on coaching as well as in coaching. I think the early career coaches tend to come almost with a list of different things they want to work through and address. But the more experienced coaches that I work with quite often come not knowing what they're going to bring into the session, but wanting to explore how they can be better coaches. And those conversations can go anywhere. It isn't a case of, oh, I had this problem with a client, because most of them don't have those they understand the relationship with ethics and boundaries and um, advice and all of those things, and have done for years. What they want to know is where are the boundaries where I can push myself further as a coach. And that feels so exciting to me, because I feel like I'm working with those amazing clients at the very edges of what coaching can and should be, and who they are as coaches and individuals, and that systemic role in the world and the organization. And that's really exciting as a supervisor.
Mm. And Ruth, how would you say that how would that supervision skills equip you to work with what your clients bring?
Um, that's a really good question. I think working with um, ambiguity and uncertainty was a really big aspect of the change that I experienced in coaching. So I think previously I'd been working under the idea that there is a right way of doing something, a right way of coaching, and I would learn how to do the right way of supervision. And I think the course taught me, the reading, the practical experience, the discussions, that there is no right or wrong way, that we're working in the areas of grey, and that we have to be comfortable in that uncertainty and ambiguity, and that we have to be flexible in our responses and confident enough in our skills, being sensitive with that interpersonal dynamics, and how our supervisee is, and still taking into account that sort of contextual, systematic, wider presence. So I think, using the seven-eyed model, for example, at the beginning, it was almost mechanic. I still do actually, had it sort of blue tacked to my wall. And I went through it as a kind of, okay, let's focus now on the client. Let's focus on you as coach. Let's focus on the tools that you use. But like anything, when you become familiar with the models, it's like you're working in this fluid grey area, and you're able to offer those flexible and adaptive responses. And your self-awareness grows so much more through those processes. Your ability to reflect and your ability to manage your own emotions were all things that I started off working with as a part of the process. And then as you practice and internalize, you're much more able to be in the moment, in that dance with your supervisee or with your group of supervisees, working towards those two common purposes of supporting your clients in the best way that you can, and supporting your profession in the best way that you can.
Okay. Ruth, in terms of your future plans, if we look towards the future, what's the future holding for you as a supervisor?
Um, I mean, I'm enjoying supervising. I think even though I do a lot of work supporting my clients in building their businesses, I think I haven't been very systematic in building my own supervision practice. I've got most of my clients through word of mouth recommendations, which is fantastic. But I think I'd like to be a bit more organized and systematic. And I think because of my teaching background, teaching of coaching, teaching of positive psychology, at some point I would really like to become involved in the teaching of supervision.
Wow, that would be lovely to see you, taking supervision even in new areas and spaces. Ruth, this is my last question, in terms of what would your advice, a few words maybe would be for somebody who's an experienced coach and are considering to train as a supervisor and are in that decision process? What would you
I would
share? What would you like to share with them?
I would say don't hesitate, because I mean, I've spoken to a number of colleagues who've trained in different organizations, and they've had different experiences of the way that the course has worked, and the how it's been organized. I think my experience was probably one of the best in those terms, but they've all said it has been utterly transformational, both for their professional development, CPD in general, but also for their coaching. And that is certainly true for me. I feel so grateful that I took that step forward, and happier, more confident, more interested, more engaged, and learning all the time, from the connections that I've made, and from the reading theoretical practice, and from that engagement with becoming, that sense of becoming the best coach, becoming the best supervisor that you can be, dancing in the moment.
Thank you, Ruth. I do have a follow-up question, which just came to me, but I
Okay.
think it's really important. Um, would you say that there is a point of readiness, not necessarily a one point, but some readiness for a coach to become a supervisor and train as a supervisor?
Yeah, I would say so. I think you need to come into supervision training with a good level of awareness of who you are as a coach. And I mean, I was going to say a good level of experience. Well, that would be really hard to define what that means in terms of numbers or hours. But I think if you're still learning how to be a coach, I mean, I'm saying that again, we all still learn how to be a coach because our coaching evolves. But I think if we haven't got clarity on boundaries, on contracting, on engagement with the client in the room, some of the new coaches that I'm talking to are saying, I find that I'm not always in the moment. I drift off. I'm not paying attention. I think if you haven't got that focus, the core competencies, listening, questioning, self-awareness, the mechanics internalized, it would be super difficult to do the supervision training because you're building on those internalized understandings. You might reshape them, you might question them, but I think you have to have them.
A strong foundation to
A
build
strong
on.
foundation in order to be able to further shape that foundation and build upon it. If the foundation itself is uncertain, if you have so many questions still about your own coaching and your own coaching experience, I don't think it would be helpful at that stage to step into supervision. So I would say a few years experience of coaching and a sense of who you are as a coach and ethical boundary taking, contracting, being present in the moment, listening, questioning skills would be super helpful before you get to the stage of wanting to supervise other coaches.
Ruth, thank you so much. It was such a pleasure to hear your journey. It was very insightful, and hopefully it will inspire a lot of coaches to take this journey if they are ready.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for asking me. It's been really nice, like all coaching and supervision, thinking aloud helps clarification of what your thinking is and where it comes from. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Ruth.